Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning if you're in the US, or good evening if you are somewhere east of the UK. East is good. Yeah, look at me knowing my geography. Hello, Peter.
Well done.
Hello, Andy. I know.
Hello.
Yeah,
Paul earns his GCSE in geography for today.
Nice.
Fun fact: I have 1.5 GCSEs in geography.
Whoa! Wow.
I did like a short course before I did the full GCSE, so I know definitely what a river is. And yeah, I'm all over my Oxbow lakes. So,
is there something that designates a river from like a stream?
Probably.
Okay.
That was in the other half. We didn't learn that.
Yeah, that was the other half I didn't do. So, welcome along, everyone. Thank you for joining us. And eagle-eyed viewers will notice that rather than just me and Peter this week, there is a third member of the band. So, let's go around and do some introductions. So, hello, I am Paul. I am the host of Cloudlights TV and the CEO of Groundwork Apps, who makes some ISV apps. I'll hand over to you, Peter.
I'm Peter Chittum, and fellow live streamer with Paul on these live streams. I'm also director of technical content at Salesforce Bend.
Very cool. I'm Andy Fawcett, otherwise known as Andy in the Cloud. I'm currently working as a consultant for Andy in the Cloud Consulting Limited. Prior to that, I was Chief Product Officer and VP of Product. Sorry, there's a lot of background noise just appeared in my house. I was at Salesforce as VP of Products, Chief Product Officer for Heroku, and prior to that at Financial Force, now Satania, as their Chief Technical Officer. So delighted to be here and to get stuck into all the wonderful exploits we'll get up to between the three of us, I'm sure.
You left. You too were an MVP, or did you say
right.
that?
Yeah, ex-MVP as well. Yeah.
Sorry, I mean, like, is there? I don't mean to presume things here for any of our audience, but I am 99% sure that Peter probably didn't need to do an introduction. I needed to do an introduction, but Andy, you definitely didn't need to do one. Anyone who's like joining along on a Salesforce live stream, if you didn't know who Andy was, then like I would be shocked. So very pleased to have you here, Andy, joining
Paul,
us.
And sorry for jumbling my words there, but you will not believe the noise that just erupted in the background of my house. The door went and the dog went crazy. You probably couldn't hear any of it, but I literally couldn't hear myself talk for a moment there. So sorry about that, but thank you very much.
You are fine. This is the benefit of live radio. As Peter and I have had many times where one of us has had an internet connection die, had to go and answer the thing. Was it with you I was streaming, Pete, once where I had like someone turn up from the council to inspect my driveway? Was that was possible? No, that was Alba. I was doing a podcast with Alba, and suddenly all the like 6 blokes in like bright orange jumpsuits turned up outside my house.
No, there was one of these though that like your connection just died, and I think I had to kind of improvise for about 5 minutes. So yeah, it happens. I mean, this is the nice thing about a fairly casual live stream, and honestly, I heard this great take on this. I want to say it was on the Pivot podcast that anymore the best thing you can do is to have low production values, because then it's probably more likely to not be AI.
Yeah,
I mean,
AI could not have predicted the door going crazy and the dog jumping up and down, but yeah, that's a very good point, Peter.
So there you go.
Paul,
Today's
did
live
you
stream.
get a fluorescent jacket from them just for the
no, it turned out they were even at the wrong house. So like they were here and they were looking. So the Andy will know that I live on, and Andy's probably been around the estate I live on, which is called the Aspen Estate. As Andy and I live all of about 20 minutes from each other. Yeah. Every road here is Aspen something. So like I live on one road. There is a road 100 meters over there that has exactly the same, but instead of road is drive. And so like I'm forever getting their post and things like that. The postman's pretty good, but like flower deliveries and things like that, you'd be shocked at the number of things. Like the worst thing I've got once was a set of flowers for condolences. So this thing turned up and it was like this big box and like it was a bunch of flowers that are just, and delivery drivers are very typically now like, there you go and run away. And so, yeah, I had to like carry this big box of flowers around to someone and knock on the door and be like, I'm sorry, this was delivered to my house and I'm just really sorry. Like,
I'm doubly sorry. Yeah. Wow.
We used to get that a lot at our old house. We were on Green Lane, and then back like the next road over was Bagshot Green. And never mind, the postcode was different, completely different. We'd still get stuff turning up at our house, and we always walked it over to the other, but like we never got anything back, which makes me wonder if like ever anything ended up there and they just kept it. I don't know.
Did you ever have any takeout deliveries that just seemingly never arrived?
Fortunately, no. I don't recall that happening, but
Okay.
yeah, every once in a while we get something for them. So
well, so Pete, you've been on some travels. Tell me what you've been up to the past, or tell everyone what you've been up to the past week or so.
Yeah, so I went to the famous Salesforce community conference called Forcelandia, which is Portland's contribution to the community conference calendar, which was fantastic. I haven't been there in 7 years, I want to say, 2018. And I remember because I was writing the JavaScript for Salesforce developers module for Trailhead. I was working on it while I was at the conference, and I know it was 2018 because it was the end of 2018 that they finally launched Lightning Web Components, and I'd written that sort of in advance. So, God, yes, 7 years since I've been.
Wow.
Fantastic to see everybody. One of the best speaker dinners I've ever had. It was just phenomenal. And now that I say that, I'm trying to remember exactly what I had, but it was so good. It was kind of this little farm out in the middle of nowhere, with just a whole bunch of like fresh, locally grown food. Yeah, I'm really trying to remember what some of it was, but it was so good.
So, were you just giving away that you were obviously you wrote the JavaScript for Salesforce developers? Andy and I were having a conversation while you were switching your laptops up. Can you answer the question, what is this, for us? Because I have no idea what this is. Is this or is this?
If I wanted to answer that question, I would totally look it up in my module I did on JavaScript. So I talked about that like in great detail. The important thing
about
though,
this in great detail.
Exactly. The important thing about this is that this works better when you have arrow functions, and then you don't need that with this.
Boom.
Very good. This is like a two Ronnie sketch, isn't it? It's just for international viewers, the two Ronnies. Just go and Google the one and find them on YouTube. Like some of the cleverest bits of comedy going.
For American viewers, I'll help out. I'm going to say they're sort of like Abbott and Costello, but they were like in the 60s and 70s, right?
Yeah.
Do I have that right?
Yeah. That's a good way of looking at it.
Yeah, and then so some really great talks. Josh Burke did his talk on AI, which is very thought-provoking. Saw two really good, very different flow talks. One was somebody recreated a dashboard using, well, it's sort of a sort of no-code recreation of a dashboard. So using App Builder, the report component or report chart component. And then a screen flow that did a very clever call out to a refresh API that would then force the dashboard to refresh after changing filter values. I mean, this was a really, really well thought out, purely declarative custom dashboard feature that I think is worth anybody taking a look at. And then the other one, who I'm going to try and get on the Salesforce Bend Deep Dive series, did a whole bunch of design patterns for flows, including Figma diagrams for how to implement them. And I'm going to, Lillian Yarlett, I want to say is her name. I hope I got her surname right. Pretty sure I did. That one was really interesting to see somebody really thinking through in an engineering like way how to construct a flow. So kudos to both of those speakers for coming up with some really interesting. Yeah, I appreciate a no code solution and good engineering around no code. So I definitely want to call that out when I see it. Yeah.
Cool.
Oh, and then this was the other thing. I got to see, so everyone know Chuck Liddell
Yep.
from Valence. So Valence is an on-platform integration tool. They demoed ingesting 1 million Salesforce records in a minute.
Nice.
Wow.
Yeah.
We're on platform. That is amazing.
That was using a combination of queuables and the new cursor feature.
Nice.
So it's pretty cool. Good stuff. Yeah, really had a great time. And then I got to connect with a bunch of friends, family, etc. So always a real pleasure to get back and kind of see people I haven't seen in a while.
Nice, very nice. What about yourself, Andy? What have you been up to this past week? Because I know they've seen a few blogs of yours coming out.
Yeah, I spent yesterday morning picking back up from life before Salesforce, when I was eager to go through all the Salesforce release notes every single time they landed. So one of the kind of quirky things I do when I do that is diff the metadata API, because often that shows changes. The WSDL, of course, the thing that describes the metadata API, often surfaces things that are not in the release notes yet, or maybe don't even come up. So I do that, and came up with things that just really interested me. And top of the list was actually relevant to this session we're about to see, because external services has got the capability now to handle binary data types, which it does so by alleviating you having to deal with them in the payload, particularly in Apex or Flow, where the heap would just likely blow with anything of a reasonable binary size. And instead it integrates with connected content version objects, so it'll marshal in and out of that object. So I just love that, frankly, because this isn't just the technology that generates Apex stubs, which most platforms do given a schema, but it actually really looks at that schema and says, well, what can I do to make it more aligned with the platform? It does it with callbacks as well. So it really kind of smacks of Salesforce taking a look at how they can bring open technology in, but really make it have a feel and tight integration with the platform. So I really loved that. And you'll see actually in this session, although we're not running in winter, we're actually having to write in the code and to update a content version object, which would be completely unnecessary with this when this feature drops. So fantastic timing of Salesforce to give us that feature, having just spent some time building out some of the demo code you're going to see today. So really enjoyed going through the release notes. A little less on Apex than I think everybody, including myself, would like to see, but overall some good APIs, integration capabilities. Good from a testing point of view. You mentioned Flow earlier, Peter. I think more and more flow is being created, and it kind of behooves us to think of good patterns and good way of separating out that flow. I won't say flow code, kind of sounds a bit weird, but you know what I mean. So that it's good and reusable, and as you do that, you need to kind of chart all of that kind of topology. So it's kind of interesting. I'll be checking out that session to see how that was done. And what Salesforce have done, why it relates to the winter release notes, is given as a way of aggregating the test results from both Apex and Flow into one kind of stream, if you like. So I do appreciate that as well, because code is code. I'll say it, whether it's written in Flow or whether it's written in Apex or anything else. It's it's going to have some bugs in it. So I do appreciate that. So I think, from my point of view, spending some time this week, Paul, just looking through the latest and greatest, and certainly added a few things on that list to my future blogs, because I want to kind of use those to drill into some further detail on those features, not having had the time to do that as yet. Just also having started the consulting gig in my world, looking forward and having some great time generating some good discussions and project work with clients. It's just been great exploring what they need and matching that up with some of my experience, not just in engineering and technical side, but more in product management and marketing side of things as well. So finding myself kind of dipping in and out of sort of past and more recent present times as well, which is fantastic. So very much enjoying that side of life. But this is great. I'm really looking forward to this session and can't wait to get into what we built here and get the questions flowing. So it's a little bit about my week. Some fun stuff, some client stuff, which is also fun, of course, and just catching up with you guys.
So it's interesting. I was looking at the release notes as well, and I was playing with some of what you talked about just now. Definitely the automated flow testing is pretty cool. And now they've also surfaced that to be able to run and retrieve flow results from the CLI.
Yep.
Yeah, so I totally agree. That's kind of exciting stuff. And I had seen that there is a send and receive binary data with external services feature that they had raised up as well. So I think that may already be there.
Yeah, I want to try that in the preview orgs. I just had a chance to read about it, but if it does what I hope it does, it'll just be amazing for anybody that's struggled to get document data in and out and still, not have to revert to JavaScript or other kind of solutions to obviate the heap or CPU limit issues. Like even this demo we're about to see here, the first version of it, we actually hit CPU limit issues deserializing the payload before it even got into memory. So, this is just going to be brilliant for the platform to handle that. I do hope the heap limits aren't kind of enforced with this feature. That would be really dumb if it was, frankly. Sorry, this has been recording, but it would be.
It's all right. Well, we can. You're on the outside now, and you can say what you like.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. I know a number of related to that. I know a number of folks, including myself, that are disappointed that the zip functionality in Apex exists within the heap as well, because that kind of limits its utility. But I kind of also know why. But sigh.
There's only so much we can do, as we have all said before. Like, we'd love to all think we had a magic wand to get things fixed, but sadly not. So one of the things we've hinted a couple of times about today's session, which is going to be slightly different to our normal chaos madness.
Is that going to be less nattering on in the beginning?
Well, I mean, we can natter on all we want for another hour. So. But in general, today we're going to see something that's got a lot more, I think, pre-work put into it than we do. And the reason is we're going to be going through some stuff to do with Heroku AppLink. So normally, so first of all, once again, hello to everyone who's joining us. Please say hi, drop us a little wave in the comments, let us know where you're joining us from. We'd love to see it. But normally, for those who haven't been here before, the way Peter and I normally structure this is we have a problem, we try and solve it. We normally have a little chat like we've just done, and then we get ourselves stuck into the problem. And I think stuck is the correct verb there. Like that tends to be what happens to us. And the reason being is that Peter and I try and show you what it's like in real life. We do a bit of prep work, but it's important to realize that part of the problem is solving the problem. Part of the fun is going through and banging your head against things. Today, because we're doing Heroku AppLink, there's a few more steps involved, and I think it's fair to say when we first started chatting about this session a couple of months ago, and we're trying to come up with an idea then that. And I'll be very happy to be the one that says this on record, wasn't the same boring idea again. And what I mean by that is that if you go into the Heroku site, there's some fantastic examples of generating a PDF, generating some quote line items, generating a few other things. Those, I think, were the same demos that we had for Salesforce functions. Those were the same demos that we probably had for like a bunch of other things that we've seen before. And they're great demos, don't get me wrong. But you've generated one PDF, you've generated them all, and that's what Visual Force is there for. So just use it. Visualforce. Be happy. Go with it. So one of the things we were trying to do is come up with a demo to show this, which A, was a bit fun and different, and B, has zero practical application in the world. Because, like, we could go away and try and build something, but we know we're going to end up cutting some corners because we have a limited amount of time and energy we can expend on it. So we've got something fun we're going to show you today, but let's start off by just chatting through a little bit as to what Heroku AppLink is. Because, Andy, I know you were doing some of the kind of blogging, marketing, and kind of promotion of this before you finished at Heroku. So do you want to give us a quick overview as to what is Heroku AppLink at 10,000 feet? If you were stuck in a lift for 15 seconds, what's the elevator pitch?
Do you want to make sure folks can see my screen, Paul? Because I'll do it by walking through the 5 ways in which Heroku enhances Salesforce developer capabilities. So, Heroku AppLink. I'll probably start with a little bit about what Heroku is. Heroku is a Salesforce product, and it was acquired by Salesforce a number of years ago now, and we're seeing really the advent of Heroku being thoroughly integrated with Salesforce, like most acquisitions end up being. But Heroku, in short, is a way that you can take code written in a variety of languages and also have data and have that fully hosted and managed for you. Normally, to bring an app to the cloud involves a myriad of things that you have to do, least of which installing various binaries, figuring out how to configure AWS or GCP, and then patching all those and scaling it and networking configuration. And sure, those are all fine things to do. But if you want to get your code out to the cloud and visible and accessible to your customers and focus really a lot of your time on doing that activity, which is really where most of your differentiation comes, then Heroku as a PaaS, what's known as a platform as a service, as distinct from an infrastructure as a service, IaaS, is really abstracting. And it's not unlike what you experience with Salesforce right now. You write some code, you write some Lightning code, you deploy it. You don't really care how that servers are set up and run and scaled. It just magically happens for you. And the same is true for Heroku. But what happens when you take Heroku and bring that into the Salesforce environment is you get an elevated experience, which necessarily you don't always need here. And you can see that Flow and Apex are still very relevant in this blog, this conversation we're having about what are all the ways that AppLink can help. But it really adds extra power when it comes to computational heavy things. And Heroku also provides additional data storage as well. And you can think of those as kind of being attached to one or more orgs. If you're finding with your Cubals or your batch Apex or you're hitting limits and such like, and you've really got to the end of those things that the capabilities that we're talking about there, then you can branch out to additional compute that Heroku gives you. Now, Heroku firstly doesn't support Apex, so you will have to break out into another language, but it does support effectively unlimited compute and data. It's a consumption-based billing model, so you'll pay for what you need. And when you realize that, then you can really take some of those processes that are kind of struggling to scale within an org and attach some compute and data to those orgs and kind of use that extra power at your disposal. So Heroku AppLink comes along, and of course it's got this nice new setup menu where you can see all of the Heroku services that you've built under setup and attach that unlimited compute. And what it does is provide that in a nice way that Flow developers, Flow designers and builders, as well as Apex, can see that as well. And we'll get into that in the demo. So the first thing is that you don't have to build connected apps. It's very topical right now. You don't have to think about OAuth or JSON and storing tokens. All of that is done by a couple of commands in Heroku. You basically write your Heroku code, deploy it, and connect it to your org, and then you can visualize those services that you've built in your setup menu. So this is a real unique native integration between this kind of PaaS platform that Heroku is and your Heroku orgs. So number 2 is really tapping into that kind of ecosystem of other languages. If you work in most organizations hire developers that will have skills in different languages, or you might be learning other languages as well as Apex. Certainly, if you've been doing LWC, you already know Node. So this capability gives you really the ability to use additional languages or leverage language and skills that you've got. And of course, these have been around for quite some time and have developed a lot of ecosystem and libraries and open source libraries around them. So the world's really your oyster in terms of how you can now extend Salesforce when you've got suddenly all these ecosystems and languages open to you. And as I mentioned earlier, you don't have to be an expert on how to configure these workloads in the cloud. Git push Heroku main is kind of the equivalent of SF project deploy start. It's really just doing the same heavy lifting for you. And I mentioned
just one question about that, Andy.
Yeah.
So, I mean, one of the things I think is interesting is that, in order to do this, each of those languages or platforms, Heroku is sort of opinionated about like what it prefers, but then there's also kind of an option for going beyond that. Isn't that right?
There is, yeah, and that makes me smile because you've given me an opportunity to both reflect on where life began for me in my career, but also just date myself, because what Peter's referring to is something called build packs, and build packs for each of these languages are curated by Heroku. In this case, these languages on screen are the ones supported by Heroku, and they're
open source too, right?
They're open source as well, and you can see those and use them to build your own build packs. But basically, they're encapsulating, well, which node version do I need to use? What's the binaries that go along with that? What JVM version do I need? And how do I use that to actually run my code? What are the configuration parameters I need? So all of that typical kind of low-level stuff you're doing in terms of what languages you're needing and the runtimes and configuration that are encapsulated in these build packs. And you don't see those because what happens is when you do git push Heroku main, it literally looks at the files in the root directory and says, I'm seeing a package JSON in there, or I'm seeing a Python file. Then it'll attach the right build pack and do all of that bootstrapping for you. Now, what Peter's alluding to is if you don't see a language that you like here, such as COBOL, you can actually go and create your own. And up until recently, .NET was a community favorite and a build pack. Now, so Heroku's brought that in, which means they'll curate it and patch it and everything else reliably so and predictably so. But yeah, if you go and look, there'll be lots of build packs for different languages. And I'm a COBOL developer from the very big way back when, and you could still write COBOL and deploy it. I actually am a big nerd when it comes to old 86 8-bit computers. So I've been learning 6502 assembly language recently. So I have it in mind to try and write a 6502 build pack for Heroku so I can upload assembly language code to Heroku. It's all emulated, of course. There's no 6502 processor support for Heroku.
Yeah, one time I played a little bit with the Elixir's Phoenix web framework. And yeah, you just go, somebody has a build pack for it, you go and find that, and then you can deploy that to Heroku too. So
yeah.
What you want to look at, Andy, is COBOL JS.
There we go. All right.
It takes COBOL code. Takes COBOL code and runs it in Node.
Oh wow, that is cool. It'll all come coming back to me.
Takeaway number one from today's stream is that COBOL is the future, and that we should all invest in that.
And that's a takeaway I don't think anybody expected to get, Paul. Well done.
Genuinely, COBOL's one of the highest paid jobs as a developer still, because there's loads of banks and things that still run on it. I knew a guy who back in like the early noughties was earning like £1,500 a day as a COBOL developer, and like with inflation, he's probably long retired now, but you could be earning a mint. There
is, and that's a here and now problem, I guess, for those institutions that definitely need to figure out how to migrate to other languages. But maybe we'll see a resurgence.
JavaScript is the cure for everything, right? Can't run COBOL, just run it on JavaScript.
The cause of and solution to all of our problems. That's another JavaScript framework.
Yeah.
So what else have we got on the for AppLink then. So we've got
what have we got? We've covered the fact that you've got all that compute power. We've covered the languages. The third thing, or the 5 here to cover, is the fact that this isn't replacing what you're building with Apex and Flow. It's augmenting that. So you'll recognize that when you go and add an action into Flow, that shows up. And that's an actual Heroku service, just plainly imported using the commands that we saw earlier. If I'm an Apex developer, then I see all of those stubs, and it even has its own namespace now. You don't see the external namespace, the Heroku AppLink. So it all feels as if it were, in fact, it could be an invocable Apex method for all really these tools care. That an action is an action, which I love, by the way, as a feature of the Salesforce platform. Lots of things are gravitating around this kind of pluggable concept of actions, whether they're Flow actions, or, Apex, or indeed Heroku actions. And the integrations become more secure, as point 4 talks about here. And what I mean by that is, when you've built integrations in the past without AppLink, you'll have definitely had to think about the user identity in that integration. And typically we'll have named a user that is that integration, even if the integration is somewhat of an interactive process. So if you've got a user sat there at the keyboard interacting with Salesforce, what you benefit from with Flow and Apex is if you're using the user mode, you're running as that user's permissions and identity. And that's good not only from a security perspective, but all of the auditing of the records flows through. So you see on the updates who updated the records or created them. And that's really important if this is going to be a true extension to what you're building in Salesforce. So thankfully, AppLink has a concept of user mode, and it will flow those credentials through. And that's all managed for you, such that when you're running your SOCL and your DML effectively in your code, Java, Node, whatever, it's doing that still under that same constraints and user permissions and sharing rules, in fact, that it would as if you were running in Apex or Flow. So I think that's great. It's coming back to the model of least privilege. And in fact, Heroku doesn't run in system mode, unlike Apex. The Heroku code will only run against the user's permissions. You can elevate those if you want. But I think that's great. So I wanted to call out as point 4. And finally, point 5 is really just reflecting that Salesforce are doing a great job at making these actions surfacing in other environments. So you can access those in Agentforce as an action, and also leverage the fact that Heroku has more data store and AI services available to it. So you needn't just do what we're doing today, which is just do some compute and return an answer. You can then spider out into other services without leaving the Salesforce kind of ecosystem, because Heroku is now, as you're hopefully seeing, if you've been looking at what Heroku is doing, is adding a lot of AI services as well into the mix. So that's it. Those are the kind of 5 real reasons why AppLink is good for us as Heroku developers. And once again, it's not to say that it's the certain replacement to any of the existing technologies. I'm a big fan of seeing all of the spectrum of how you can build on the platform. There's no one size fits all. It's about choosing the right tool for the job.
Cool. No, I mean, this is one of the things that I really like about this is Andy and I were chatting earlier on. I was saying I've got a particular use case in mind for connecting to my ISV CRM org, so the one where I look after all my customers and things. And just being able to do that now using AppLink is going to be so much more secure and robust than it would have been beforehand. Even if I'm using OAuth and everything else, it's just, rolling your own is never as good as having something that's built by a bunch of smart people to work with. I think as well, these things, one of the nice things I think that's coming out of this as well is I was talking to someone the other week about why I use Heroku versus building something on AWS. And so I'm working on an app that's actually for another CRM, not Salesforce, but that other CRM kind of just calls out to API endpoints as part of their integration. And part of me was like, well, do I just set this up as some Lambda functions and put an API gateway in place? And as I started thinking, like, well, I need to have a database to do this. Okay, great, I can do that. And then I need to have this part on, and then I need to have this part on. And I'm capable of doing all these things, but I'm also incredibly lazy. And so it's like, I could just go with Heroku and focus on building my app, and then let Heroku worry about a lot of that stuff. And the more you think about the internal plumbing you've got to do, the less I think you're actually doing development, which is kind of where my strong suit is, rather than sitting down and configuring exactly which API gateway setup I need to use to go and call which Lambda function and blah, 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 blah.
Just because you should doesn't mean you, just because you can doesn't mean you should. And frankly, also, I think to add to that, it would keep me up at night. I think, like you, I kind of know how to do auth and connected apps and store tokens and all that sort of stuff. But, have I got it right? Am I following the latest stuff of how to get that right and latest trends? So, yeah, I honestly am lazy too. I like the way you use that, and sometimes I say that to people. I'm a lazy developer, and I say that only after they've got to know me a bit better, because it really isn't because I write shoddy code. It's because I don't like doing things over and over again that don't really add value and exploit the best of my skills. So I like to be in that club too, Paul.
It's a famous Bill Gates misquote, isn't it? Which is, I choose a lazy person to do a hard job because a lazy person will find the easiest way to do it.
Yeah.
Which, explains a lot about Windows ME.
So does that, I mean, presumably some of those things about AppLink also are going to make it a lot more attractive to maybe, Salesforce customers that are in regulated industries or that sort of thing, especially given the kind of fuzziness of OAuth, like, what is a secure OAuth connection is not really clear, which is why they came up with FAPI, as like an additional protocol that sort of sits on top of OAuth. So, presumably with AppLink, if that bank or insurance company or, healthcare provider, if they had both Salesforce and Heroku, they just wouldn't need to worry about that that connection at that point.
Yeah, it's one of the big goals.
Yeah. Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So, should we talk about what we're going to show people that we built today? Cool. So, when we were coming up with an idea a couple of months back, I had just finished reading a book that I thoroughly recommend everyone go and read. Which is, I'm going to say, one of Douglas Adams' lesser-known works. So, again, not to typecast the viewership of this wonderful live stream, but most people will be familiar with Douglas Adams as the author of A Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which is one of the greatest bits of work ever written. But one of his other books that he wrote is called Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency. And if you haven't read it, please go and buy a copy after this. It is a fantastic book. There's 2 in the series, and then there's sadly he passed away before he could finish the 3rd one. But it's about a detective called Dirk Gently who has an approach to solving. He's a private eye and has a approach to finding out solutions, which is just that the universe will somehow work it out. And there's a lot of kind of fluid quantum mechanics discussions in there. There's if you haven't read a lot of Douglas Adams, it's really good in general as a book. But the book he wrote there's a book called The Salmon It Out, which is a collection of his writings that were kind of collated posthumously. And the man was 20 years ahead of his time in terms of thinking about where computers were going, if not further. There's so many things in there now that I'm like, you invented e-commerce before e-commerce was a thing. He could just had not just 2020 vision, but 100 vision. He just knew. But in this book, there is a character called Gordon Way, who becomes rich for creating something called Anthem. And when Douglas Adams was thinking, what is the most ridiculously pointless piece of software I could think of anyone ever generating that would make them rich, he came up with the idea of a piece of software that takes your accounts and turns them into music. And Andy and I both worked at accounting companies together on the Salesforce platform, and I think it's fair to say, Andy, and feel free to disagree with me, that accounting data is hardly what anyone would call sexy and riveting.
I'm not inclined to disagree with you.
Yeah, exactly. And for any accountants on there, I wish you luck, but it ain't for us muggles. So what we're going to show you today is a little system we built that takes an opportunity, and it will retrieve information from that opportunity, the account it's related to, and an opportunity line item that's related to it, and will then generate some noise that represents that opportunity.
You mean not music?
Yeah,
I like the way you said that as well, Peter. Good setting the scene there, Paul.
Yeah, noise is a very particularly chosen word because
weird side note here. Literally last week, I heard an accountant describing going through an audit as beautiful and storytelling. So there you go.
Wow,
or whatever that's worth.
Now you set the bar too high, Peter.
Yeah. So yeah, noise was a very carefully chosen word because the very first sound that I think I created in the very first demo version of the LWC, I don't know if I haven't got Slack open for Andy's message, but I think it included the words "made me jump." So so this is going to be a warning for anyone who is listening along, with headphones on. We'll try and warn you before we play any sounds, before you hear anything, but it will be a noise. It's not as jarring as it was, and we'll talk through how we're generating it. But today we are creating a version of Anthem from Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency. And yeah, the nice, cool thing we've done here is we've got a bunch of stuff we've generated, a bunch of stuff we built out, and we have a repository that you can go away and you can do this all yourself with afterwards. Okay, so everything you're going to see today, you can do with a Scratch org or a developer org. You need to get a Heroku account, spin up a dyno. I think that's what, $5, something like that. For the dyno, dead cheap. It's less than a cup of coffee. So yeah, definitely do so. And there's a link to the book that you should go and buy as well because it's absolutely brilliant and well worth your time. So, shall we begin? So let's start off, I think, by showing people what we have in the end. So I'm going to share Andy's screen, and hopefully everyone can see our wonderful Lightning Web Component on there. So, Andy, do you want to talk us through what the kind of rough track of things people are going to be seeing? And this is your warning that there will be a sound played at some point once Andy presses that big play button.
I love it now that we've shifted from music to sound and noise. So yes, be prepared. So yeah, the button here is a Lightning Web Component that's going to call out to Heroku backend to consume all of this data on this opportunity record I'm looking at, and then it'll compile that and store that actually in a notes and attachment. You see one there from the previous run, and then play it. So let's listen. We go. The sound of silence is what this is.
Yes,
fantastic.
We have had a fantastic. Can I make an educated guess as to what it might be?
You might be able to.
If you clear out the content documents in your org, you might have run out of space. We were testing earlier on.
Yeah, let me do.
What's the name of that? There's an orchestral piece that's literally 4 minutes and 30 seconds of rest.
There you go. I'm just now Googling that. It is called 433. Modernist composition by American experimental composer John Cage.
That's what it was. I couldn't think of his name.
I was listening to a podcast called Origin Story, which is a fantastic podcast if you just want to learn cool and inquisitive things. They're doing an episode on Shostakovich and his relationship with Stalin. Oh. And Shostakovich got, and I'm going to use the word cancelled by Stalin. I know that, that's a
euphemism.
He was kind of persona non. He was really famous until after Lenin died. Then Stalin was like, "Nope, don't like your stuff." And he clawed his way back into favor, became really famous again. Then again, got kind of like, "Nope, no one likes your stuff." Lived in fear of being killed. And one day, Stalin rang him up literally answered the phone. It's Stalin at the end, and he's thinking, I'm ended here. And Stalin said, "Listen, I want to include your works as some of our cultural kind of exhibits. I want you to travel to New York for this kind of peace conference." And he had to tell Stalin over the phone that, "I'm sorry, I'd love to, but my works are banned currently." And so I was like, "Oh, I don't know which idiots banned them. I'll get that undone." It's like you were the one who banned them. So,
okay, that's a lot better canceling than I thought that was
yeah,
going to be. So,
no, he died of old age. He was
okay.
He didn't. So, Andy, have we vamped enough with a random story about Russian composer for you to try?
You're right. You were on the money there, Paul. That was actually the issue. I've used up the storage.
1 minute.
Did you
1 minute.
guys hear my test just then, or did you take me off mic while I was playing?
We didn't hear it. So you might want to just recheck that tab. But all I'm going to do quickly is give myself a round of applause for finding the problem.
Like it.
We have X now, people, so you can expect lots of them.
Yeah.
All right, yeah. Let me reshare that tab. All righty.
So,
all right, should we go for round 2?
Yes.
Ready?
Can't wait.
So it made a noise.
There we go.
Hey, there we go. Demo over. That's it, everyone. No. So just to kind of set the scenes a little bit for people. We were doing some testing earlier just beforehand. We'll show you how you can generate these locally and vary them a little bit in a minute. I will say that sounded different to what it sounded like on my machine running the same code earlier on. So I think there is something with the system audio as well. So it will sound a bit more foghorny, I think, over system audio. Anyway, so yeah, that's cool. We got a noise.
We got a noise. All right, let's take a look at how on earth we managed to generate such a pleasant melody, shall we?
Yeah. So the kind of whilst we're just kind of getting started, one of the things we wanted to try and do here is to do something that is really kind of redundant and pointless. No one. If you wish to put that in your production environment, then good luck to you, and you can annoy all your salespeople by having large foghorns play for them. But yeah, it's designed to just be a bit of fun for us to see. So you can see your screen. Do you mind zooming in just a touch?
Let me do that.
Thank you.
How's that?
That's perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome. Right. Okay. Well, let's. We've done a bit of local deployment already, but let me just tour you through the project. This is kind of a hybrid project and definitely open to feedback and thoughts. So it's honestly not a discussion about how to create a Heroku and Salesforce project in one repo, but just for ease, that's the model and approach we've taken here. So source is, in fact, the JavaScript source. So we've got the JavaScript that we've been talking about generates the wonderful melodies. And then we've also got source-org, which is the more familiar collection of where our Apex and LWC and permission sets are. So those are our 2 source projects, source folders. And when you deploy to Heroku, it'll deploy the according one. And when you deploy to Salesforce, obviously the according one as well. We've got our source org set up here in the SFD project. What else have we got in here? We've got some binary, a bin folder with some shell scripts in it. So we'll be using some of those. They're just helper shell scripts. Some will highlight, actually, just generally, whether you're working with AppLink or external services. There's a good, useful tool here that'll download that, particularly if you're using AI, so that it can see the Apex stub code and generate more accurate code that consumes those stubs. So that's a useful utility. So some utilities. We've got our usual config. The scratch org config is nothing different here, just as you would at default would expect. We've got some data in here as well, so all the JSON is there. I've gone ahead and run the bin data shell script. The reason why it's a shell script is it does use the SF CLI facility to do like the import plan, as you can see here. But when you're importing opportunities in products, it kind of lacks the ability to detect the standard price book ID. So that shell script just retrieves that and injects it into the right place to make all that work. But yeah, we've got all our accounts and opportunities. That's basically the data Paul was referring to that pulled it all together. Let's just finish up the tour here. We've got a script here so we can see it just running via Apex, which we'll do later. That's our source. So yeah, that's about it for the directory structure. And I've gone ahead and run the local dev stuff already. We've got a scratch org and I've put the data in. And let's go ahead and actually run that code from the command line. Now, one of the things I want to do is just show the fact that if you just do npm start, it's running the API, which is what we've created in here. This is all basically an API using Fastify described here. And one of the great things I like to do when writing Heroku APIs or any API that's running on Heroku or not is use the Swagger toolset, which generates nice pages so you can see in the browser what your API looks like. So let's just go and look at that over yonder and get the right packet and the right port there. So now that that's running, we can actually have a go at the API and actually try running it. So it takes the opportunity ID and returns a content version ID, which is the attachment with the data that the LDC component runs. If I go and try that out now, despite not even having a valid opportunity ID, I'll get an error back because it expects certain headers that need to be passed in and then decoded to get the authentication of the running user. And we were talking about that earlier. And the way it's configured, obviously, that's not being sent and passed through. Now, normally, if this was called from a Salesforce org, it would generate that for you. But because we want to stay local for a minute, we do have a invoke script that will do that for us. So that's actually what's being described here, and that simulates or generates those headers so that the local web server thinks it's being called from Salesforce, which is great because then we can debug and do whatnot. So let's just give that a go. And I'm going to just make sure I get the right opportunity IDs. When I was doing this with Paul earlier, was scratching our heads and had the wrong org open. So everybody's been there and done that, I'm sure. I'm going to open the right org this time. And
you mean you can't guess an opportunity ID off the top of your
head?
No,
I just have somehow not been able to get to that that stage in life. So let's go and do that. That org we were using earlier, by the way, was just a previously produced one. So I do need the org ID from this. And actually, to save me doing that, since we're done with that demo org, I'm just going to close it. All right, so we have our org ID. We should finish that off with the appropriate syntax here. And make sure it can call that. Should see a JSON response come back, which we do. So we see our web server debug outputted some information and it told us that it generated the content version ID, and we saw that in the response. So at this point, we can go and have a look at that and refresh that. This is where all those other content attachments are hiding. That is using up all our space. So yeah, that looks like the latest one. So good, we've been able to run locally. We want to go a bit step further here because we want to hear the sound. Just looking at the JSON doesn't really give us that wonderful experience we had earlier. So sticking with local, there's another shell script we created here that basically uses a little HTML file. And this kind of brings me to a point where I want to highlight another winter feature. So we do obviously have the code in the Lightning web component that will play the sound. I'll just briefly bring that up here. This is the code Paul was talking about earlier, and it's in this controller. But I aren't running the LWC locally. I'm just going to run a copy, if you like, of the salient bits of this code so we can hear it locally. But there is the capability to run this component locally. But in the past, you've not been able to access any data or even Apex controllers that this code might want to use. So now with Winter, it appears, I've not really had my hands to confirm this personally, that that's limitation has been removed, which is great because we can get closer to running more locally, the local experience of your LWC component, inclusive of the data and controllers in the org. But that's a side point. We're not going to do that today, unfortunately.
Is that still in beta? Do I remember? I have briefly kind of scanned some of the winter release docs because I've tried using, and Pete, we tried doing local dev, didn't we, on one of our earlier streams for LWC, and had mixed results in trying to get it running. So just to caveat for anyone out there who's looking at it, it is a beta feature. It is, I think it was preview and now is beta, so just be aware of
more broadly available, but definitely not GA. Yeah. Cool. Okay, so let's give it a go and run it locally so we can see. And this is where we'll do a Heroku deploy so folks can see how that works, and we'll look at AppLink and how it's configured, and we'll loop back, and Paul's going to play with the code and see if we can generate different tones and see the effects of that. We'll do that locally. So I'm just going to run the local version of it, and I will have to stop sharing and reshare just to get the audio through, but we're going to do that here, and I'll do that once the tab opens. So we'll take that there. So all this is doing is spinning up the web server and calling that API just like we did manually, and then storing that JSON data locally, and then it'll spin up a web page, which I'll show you. Okay, so I have that web page up. Let me just put that in view here. All right, so bear with me a second while I stop sharing, because we know that sharing desktop won't do the audio. I'm just going to reshare that specific tab. Okay, everybody see that?
1 sec. They can now.
Okay, so this is your warning. Okay, there we go. Good. So we know our local development's working. Aside from the client code, this is a copy of that code. It's using the same API code that it would if we were to deploy it to production. So let me resume sharing my screen, and let's go to production. Why not? Let's just live life on the edge. Let's go and deploy this thing.
Get it deploying.
I know, right? Okay. All right. So my screen's back up.
There you go.
Okay, good. Right. So as Paul said, all of the instructions are in here, and descriptions of some of those tools I've just been using, those shell scripts and so on. So in the deployment section, we already have our Scratch org, and we've already deployed the data. And now we need to deploy a permission set. And the reason for this is that it is a privileged capability to be able to attach Heroku services, this API, to a Heroku org. So there is a particular permission that's required for that. So just for ease, you can find that and attach, set it on your profiles or permission sets as you like. I've just deployed a small mini permission set that does that. So that's what that's done. So that's a bit of admin out of the way. Obviously, you don't need to do that every time, but because this is a Scratch org, I obviously need to repeat that. The connection capability between Heroku and Salesforce orgs, I like to say plural there, by the way, because you can attach multi-org, which is a cool feature. And we can talk about it a bit later, but
I was wondering about that, but that's cool.
It does allow you to create like one central service and have multiple orgs then to get into that, which does allow you to do a lot of multi-org action or activity aggregation. If you think about it, like I said, it comes through as the running user in that org. If you attach multiple orgs, the same will apply. So it's really good for that kind of capability. So I did just generate a password. Obviously, this is a Scratch org, so do feel free to copy paste it if you like. It's got nothing in it of great sensitivity, and it will disappear in 7 days. So let's do the Heroku bit now. I do need the password, so that just allows me to connect to Heroku, and the Salesforce org will come back to that later. I do have a reminder in these notes just in case I had a Heroku app that was connected before, which I didn't. That would clean that out. So let's start the process. And this is really early days. This is just one-on-one regular Heroku stuff. This is kind of like creating a an app, if you like, in Salesforce. Just there's nothing in this app right now. It designates you a URL, warm lake, just like we get with Scratch orgs. This will continue to exist. It won't cost you anything, this one, because it's got no code or data deployed to it. Now, Heroku, we talked about, Peter mentioned the beauty of build packs earlier. Another real capability that makes using Heroku so easy, and Paul mentioned earlier, is like, well, I need a database. How do I need to provision a database? How do I back up and recovery and manage all of that and the connections to it? Well, Heroku has a concept of add-ons, and these basically add extra services to your application that we're building here. And that might be a database. It could be a Redis or cache store or a message queue, or if you go out into the Heroku Elements marketplace, which is kind of like the Apex equivalent, but it gives you like logging services, scheduling services, ability to connect to AWS more easily. So these add-ons are plentiful. There's hundreds of them, really. But this is a Heroku add-on that we're going to provision, hence the name Heroku AppLink. And it provisions really quickly. The database ones do take a few minutes to provision, but the beauty of this is if this were a database, yes, I could go and figure out how to set up Postgres and install it. And but I don't really need to. It'll just do that for me.
And then that's also just be aware of the add-on, because obviously that company's trying to make money as well. So you might need to pay them a license too, right?
Yeah, and I believe you do get some warnings about that when it comes up in the CLI and in the UI. But yes, be aware of that. This one is a free one, which is where it'll say that. But I think at this point, if that were a paid one, you'd get confirmation of what that is.
There are so many out there that have really generous free tiers, though. I was looking at one for an app that I'm working on to use AMQP, which is like the Rabbit MQ, the messaging protocol. And it was like something like 1 million messages, a 24-hour period was free. And I was like, if I'm doing above 1 million messages in my use case per 24 hours, then
you'd gladly pay it.
Yeah, happy to go up to $25 a month or whatever it was afterwards. I was like, oh.
Has Heroku taken a position on the sort of Redis versus Valkey thing?
It is using Valkey under the covers now, which is why actually it's been rebranded. It's no longer called Heroku Redis. It's Heroku Key Value Store.
Got it. Okay. I missed that. Yeah.
All right. So let's add a build pack as well. Now, this is an interesting one because it's a build pack that isn't really about the language choice that we've made here, which is Node, but it actually adds a service around. It's like a wrapper around that API. That means that it's now not going to be publicly accessible. You can access the endpoint, but it will give you errors unless you are a Salesforce org, which is great because a lot of folks ask about that. It's like, okay, I'm publishing this service, I've got an endpoint, but who can access it? Well, from this moment on, with this service mesh around it, it means only authenticated Salesforce orgs can access it. So in the past, we didn't have this service mesh when we ran locally, so it just took our kind of generated tokens and things, but you wouldn't get away with that with this service mesh enabled. So we do have to actually teach you about Node.js. It's just kind of a quirk the way that we're adding the build packs, but normally you wouldn't just have to tell it it's Node.js. It'd infer that.
Sorry, Andy, just to step back on that service mesh AppLink that you just added. I might have just misheard you while I was scratching my ear, but did you say that adding that stops your API being available to anyone who's unauthenticated, or was it something else about the authentication?
No, that's correct. Yeah.
Okay, so even if publicly available API now is you add an authentication layer onto it straight away.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Which is something to think about without getting too far into the weeds, because in this case, we've built this service API solely for the use and consumption within Salesforce. But if you have an API that exists already and you want some operations to work from Salesforce and others not, or both, then you do have to think about that. I kind of won't derail us too much by getting into the detail of that, but there's some detail to think about there. So the next command to run is this Heroku app ID thing. It is kind of a UX oddity right now. I think they're working to remove the need for us to have to do that. It's a one and done thing. Don't worry about it. Once you've set your Heroku app, just leave it there. And now we get on to the kind of magic of Heroku. It's like at this stage, I'd be sifting through, no disrespect to AWS or any IaaS platforms, but I would be sifting through their myriad of smorgasbord of icons, figuring out how to spin up a machine or a Lambda or whatever. Instead, what I'm going to do is just run git push Heroku main, because what Heroku has done is attached itself as a git remote repository to this project. So although we didn't run a Heroku CLI command here, Heroku intercepts this and said, I'm going to take the source code and actually build a container and run that for you. So you can see it's doing all the build-like stuff, but this is Heroku doing that, not my machine, which is good from a point of view of governance when you're thinking about, well, what versions of Node am I running in production, which version of Java, JVM, and whatnot. This all kind of solidifies all that in one process, regardless of what I might be running here locally. And obviously, it's good practice to stay aligned between those. But you can see it kind of picked out the versions of Node and things, installed the right binaries and stuff as part of its process. So that's actually up and running, and that URL could be hit, but as we just discussed, we can't even see the docs that I just showed earlier. It just won't let any URLs through unless they're coming from a well-known organization. So now that we've got the app deployed, we need to connect it to Salesforce. So I'm going to do that with this command here. And like I say, this one will prompt us. But for those of you thinking about DevOps and how this works in those scenarios, like in your pipelines, there is a headless version of it. So I'm just going to go and bring that down. I'll bring this tab into view so you can see what I'm doing. So it comes up with this. And this is kind of, as Peter was saying, like under the covers, it's using all the connected apps and OAuth stuff, but you're not having to learn all of that. You're getting nice views of what's going to happen, and you'll see you have to confirm all of that as an admin, but you're not having to have gone off and had to configure all of that. So I'm going to log in, and this is where I do need to go and grab those details, which instead of aimlessly scrolling, I'm just going to do sf.org display and get those for me more easily to get the username. And where is the username? There it is.
Right at the bottom.
Yeah. And we'll do that here.
While Andy's copying that across, just on the AWS huge list, I just went to go have a look and see if they still had the terrible screen of icons. They've removed that now. I do not mean any disrespect at all here to AWS, but it's possibly an even weirder UI.
Yeah, I've abstracted too far, I'm guessing.
Are you talking for AWS console?
No, the AWS site. The AWS site used to have this huge, like the console has all those icons. Yeah, it used to have all this. It looks like, it loads very quickly because there doesn't seem to be a lot on there. It looks very, very standard HTML, very basic. Anyway, I digress. Sorry.
Yeah, to be fair, I think it comes back to the definition between IaaS and PaaS. Like, you expect a different persona for your product and a different user and level of control. And in some cases, Heroku deliberately does not let you have the level of control you have with an IaaS platform, which is why their experience is more detailed and more sophisticated and more complex in some places. So, you kind of get what you get depending on what level you're coming in at. And to be fair, that's what the target they're at. And Heroku is actually available on the AWS marketplace, and Salesforce and Heroku are very good chums and realize the abstraction levels, as I'm saying. So, I think it's good to compare this way, but the reality is that with every product, you're looking at different target personas and different use cases. So,
yeah. And just to do a side note, you mentioned the magic of Heroku. There have been other platform as a service providers like Vercel and Render, and AWS had kind of an easy to deploy, sort of, I don't even know what to call it, feature, product. I've not really played with any of those. Like, what do you know about those, and how different are they?
Yeah, I mean, I have, and it's been a year or two more, but and those services continue to evolve. But
Sure.
I think you have to look at what, from a past point of view, what are you targeting there? And Heroku has always targeted the whole dev app experience, which has been needing data, needing a pipeline, needing compute, and kind of wrapping its arms around a good DX for all of that. And some services do tend to focus on the data side of things, more on the compute, less on the compute, and vice versa. And then some of them don't necessarily have all of the DevOps pieces. So I think it's good when you're looking at all of these without turning this into an analysis answer.
That's fine. Yeah, no.
Just look at like what you want out of that and make sure that you're kind of shortlisting what it is you're trying to solve for. Is it DevOps? Is it compute? Is it data? Is it developer experience? And just make sure that you're looking at it through a singular set of lens, because they do tend to vary a little bit, particularly the ones you listed.
And obviously, like Heroku, AppLink, Salesforce. If you're a Salesforce customer and you're looking for it, and you don't already have a commitment to one of those other providers, clearly that's what Salesforce is going for with AppLink, right? So
yeah.
That was just an extra thing I was going to say on having been in a number of conversations of like positioning Heroku as an option versus these others. So having in previous lives, I've used like Cloud Foundry, OpenShift, and Elastic Beanstalk, I think was the Amazon one, and even like Azure and GCP. They're all fantastic platforms. The biggest thing I would say is to see what the organization has in place. There was one customer I worked with who were one of the big wall-to-wall Salesforce accounts. So there's a few of these mega accounts that Salesforce have where sort of like $50 million a year in revenue for them, and like they've just got unlimited almost everything. And this was one of those customers. They went for Heroku because they were pretty much a wall-to-wall unlimited customer. But there was another organization who had a huge Salesforce org set up, multiple orgs, big global pharmaceutical company. But they went with OpenShift instead because they had a huge number of Red Hat developers and people who are used to managing things through that. If you've got a lot of experience with AWS, Elastic Beanstalk is really good because it integrates natively there. If you've got a lot of experience with like Docker or Kubernetes, then you have different options there. So I think that, as one of the things I would really kind of encourage people to think about is as developers, and I've seen this a lot, especially around kind of the whole serverless idea with Lambdas and things like that, is as developers, we want to use what we think is cool and what works, like what we think is going to be nice and kind of easy to manage and maintain and things like that. But there's a lot of maintenance in the background that we don't often think about, is contracts and whose neck we have to wring if something goes wrong. And there was one instance with a customer who I got on board with Heroku and Heroku Connect, in fact. And the reason we chose that is we could have done it much cheaper on other platforms, but they knew that they could call Salesforce and get support, and their team knew where Salesforce support were, how to get hold of them. Quite frankly, they knew who the account manager was if they needed to go and strangle someone to get things elevated and answered. Whereas, and I would never say that any support team does this, but if there are two moving pieces with two different companies, you can bet that each company is going to say it's the other one that has a problem.
Like that famous Spider-Man sketch, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
That's right. Yeah. It's that meme. Absolutely.
Yeah. And so there are side cases on that. Like if you've ever worked with Service Cloud Voice from Amazon and Salesforce, like that is a really, really sweet integration, and the teams there work so well together.
Oh, really? That's good to know.
Hand in glove. Like that was that's been a really good experience where they actually want to help each other. But I had more than one instance. Like this is just me being a boring weathered consultant, where like you're sat there and you can see that there's an error, and Team A says it's Team B, and Team B says it's Team A, and you're like, I don't care. We're losing data and we're losing money. Please just hop on a call and figure it out.
Yeah, it is important that a product is made up of not just the product that you think you're buying, but the company and the people you're having to work with, and how well they'll support you in those sort of scenarios. So, you know, your product experience extends well beyond what you might think it is. It's support, it's sales, and everything. So it's a good reflection, Paul. So let's move along. I have connected the org, so I logged in, and you can see here at the bottom it's connected. So the next bit is the bit I enjoy the most, which is now deploying this, or rather publishing, should I say, this Heroku app into Salesforce. This CLI is a little bit more verbose. I tend to just do it so I can just talk about it, but the parameter, largely half of it's optional. But we need to give it the schema for the service, and we have got that. I didn't mention that earlier, but that's in the root of our project. It's some YAML. If you're not kind of familiar with this, or really would rather not care, once again, there's many frameworks that'll generate a schema definition for you. It's an industry standard that describes all the inputs and outputs. AppLink CLI at the moment does require it to be a physical file, but I have in the bin folder here a way of just dynamically refreshing that based on the code that you've edited. And other languages that are more typed will infer this as well from literally the classes that you define. So anywho, we've had to give it that, and then the name is really just the name that you'll refer to it inside Salesforce. And the connection name is what I used when connecting. It's a bit like an org alias. And then these are really the names of the under the cover connected apps and permission sets that it creates. I just do this because I like to control the names of them, that kind of align a bit better with what my client name is. But these are required to make sure, as with everything in Salesforce, that the users have the permissions to call these services. So you'll see that they'll get assigned momentarily. So let's go and run this. And then once we assign them, we'll hop over to the setup menu and see the evidence. So it's publishing this Heroku app. That's done. And then we'll just assign these two permission sets, just so that we'll be successful in invoking them. The second one, incidentally, is what I hinted at earlier, is that you can, when the code runs, it runs as the user's permissions and sharing rules and everything else that is available to them. But you can use this second permission set to add stuff that the code will also have access to. So it's like an elevated mode. If the user doesn't have access to fields or objects that the code needs to query or update, then for the execution of that invocation, it will apply this additional permission set, which is kind of cool as an elevation mechanism. So let's go back over to the org and go to the setup menu, and we'll take a little look at what's popped up there.
Can you zoom in again a touch, Andy?
I will, yes. Thank you, Paul. All right, there we go. So there it is. There it is, Heroku published apps. It's the Generate Anthem one. This is where you'll start to see, if I click into that, something familiar. It is using external services under the hood, but you'll see that the creation source is Heroku. So certain things that are blocked here because it's somewhat of a managed connection. And then, of course, we can go in and see the details of the request and response. And as with any other external services, obviously, we see the dynamically generated classes here as well. And I'll just quickly show you how easy it is to download those with that shell script, because in developing this, we can use AI, and that's what we did to help generate code and work with an agent to do that. But it became a lot easier when it had access to that, because previously all I had to do was like copy paste all of that stuff in, because you can't download this code. It's dynamically generated and managed by the system. So that's what Heroku looks like under the setup menu. I won't show it here, but those actions do appear in Flow as well. So if I go and add an action, as you saw in my intro, they appear there. So
is there a way to go and actually see that app deployed in the Heroku?
Yes.
What's it called? Console, like directly through the Salesforce setup?
Yeah, thanks, Peter. Let me just make sure I can. Am I still logged in today? Yeah, I am. Yeah. So you'll see some of my longest running apps, which is the GitHub SF deploy in here. Yeah. Been there for over 10 years. Still running.
Say that is an ancient app.
It is an ancient app. So yeah, there it is. You can see the resources. It's got AppLink attached. In fact, this AppLink does have its own dashboard as well. Believe it or not, this arrived fairly late, and it's the very first time I am seeing it as well. So we're sharing in this experience. So it looks like you can see the authorizations and connections and publications. I can see it's deployed somewhere, which is cool.
And if I'm doing something like building this in, sandbox / developer environment in Heroku, presumably there's kind of some ways to automate as I promote this into like UAT or integration or production. I can kind of follow that same process through the pipeline feature at Heroku as well. Yeah.
There is. It is configurable in Heroku, the pipeline feature. Of course, if your driving pipeline is more something like DevOps Center or one of the many ones available out there in the ecosystem, then you might want to integrate the Heroku CLI and APIs that does all of this into that.
Right.
So depends where your source of truth is, I guess, for your pipelines. But yes, you can do that.
Cool.
So yeah, that's kind of the Heroku side of things, and we can also view the logs and stuff from here as well, just to see that the app's up and running, which should be. The app server's listening, so great.
But as of today, you don't see any of the Heroku UI through your setup menu.
You do not. Okay. I do hope some of that might change.
That'd be nice. Yeah.
I mean, to drill in a little bit further going forward. So
it's not a huge deal. It's just a little thing, right?
Yeah, and the Heroku API, like the Salesforce APIs, is fully available. Has a platform API. So I have seen some, particularly ISVs and others, manage their platform API that way. So it's possible to automate quite a bit with it, to be honest. All right, so where did we get? We did have sign up permission sets. So let's now deploy. The reason I've not deployed our little LWC component is because it has some classes, and there's a controller here that uses that generated code. So had I have done that prior, it would have failed. But now I've done the integration, these classes exist. So you can see actually in action here, this is the LWC components controller, Apex controller. It gets the opportunity ID and creates the service, which is this one here, and sets the opportunity, and then waits for the response, and then basically hands it back. It's very basic here because obviously the LWC is doing the bit, but notice it doesn't bring the content back because that came back as a content version ID that's sent back to the LWC component that downloads it, and you can see that's using the good old Lightning data services to get hold of that content data, parse it, and then somewhere down here, I think Paul is this is the create audio buffer, and eventually it plays the audio buffer. So that's the code that we're going to deploy to the Salesforce orgs. Let's just do that now. That's available. And one thing that's pretty light, so it's been deployed. One thing we didn't do, which is the last manual step, is to go and add the button to the page. So I'm just going to go and do that quickly.
This is also, I was just going to say, this has taken like a few minutes more to set up because we've been talking through it. But these commands, if you were to bang through them, you could have this deployed and set up in a matter of minutes.
Yeah.
One of the nice things about like all the command line tools for Heroku in particular, it's very quick and easy to get running.
Yeah, I mean, quite often when I've been testing this, because I'm a big fan of Cursor, I just say read the README file. And I do stress to it because it's AI. Read the README file and exactly run the CLIs. Mm-hmm. In the past, I'd said read the README file for deployment and run it. It'd go off and just make itself, I think I can do a better job this CLI. But as long as you prompt it correctly, I've seen it rattle through that in under 2 minutes, because there's a point where I have to manually type in the username and password, which I could automate as well. But you're right, it's quite streamlined. I think there's room to improve it even more. But this is a V1 of AppLink, so I think it's a great start. And some of the commands don't. It's particularly if it's a sandbox or production. You don't repeat. You really just do the publish potentially, or really once your contract between the API and Salesforce, your org, is nice and stable, you're probably just iterating your Heroku app. You're not really doing anything again. So you have, with all of these things, you have to think about how frequently you have to do the task. And if the reality is it's infrequent, then it's actually not that significant. All right. So let's go and do that. So I'm going to play it, but you won't hear it, which you'll be gracious for, but you'll see the messages come up. When we get to the third chapter of this whole session, we're going to have Paul. So that worked. The last thing is worth showing is that you can obviously invoke this from Anonymous Apex as well. So we did create this code. It reads the opportunity and then does the invoke. And this is also just useful because maybe you want to just test it out without running the client up. So if we just run that, this will effectively do what we were doing earlier, but obviously it's not local anymore, it's remote. So you can see from the debug log, it received it and then got the response back. And if we've still got our log open here in Heroku, you can probably see a hell of a lot more stuff coming through. Yeah, there we got the request coming through as well, and all of the different debug output. So that's fully deployed at that point, Paul. You know, that's where we're at in terms of proceedings. Where do you want to go next?
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit through some of the stuff we've got in the repository. So, because I think we've shown everyone nicely a nice way that, just to talk through the flow again, we press our button on our LWC. It then makes a call. In fact, do you want to bring up the LWC code for us?
Yes.
And let's just kind of go through some of this step by step.
Folder. There we go.
Sorry. So in anthemplayer.js, so if we scroll to the top, so what happens is when we press play, we go away and we do some invocation, but more importantly, we go away and we wait for our generate command. So line 31, I think, is the key, key line for us there. And that is calling our Apex method, which is in our controller. And if we hop into our controller real quick, we can just see that all that's doing is going away and calling out to our AppLink service. So you can see there we have to instantiate the service, we create the request, and then we call the service and go through our response and do our creation steps, which is just quite nice and simple. It's obviously, I think what the benefit of this is, if you scroll down, the end of that method, I think, is like line 50 something, line 60. There's a lot of error handling code we've got in here. Like, what I will say, and this is Peter, cover your ears a little bit. This is way more detailed and better written than normally the code we'd have for these sessions. We're going through it, so it's very, very well structured here, very nicely set up, because a bit of thought has been, not a bit of thought. That's denigrating the code we'd order at. Further thought has been put into this without the kind of pressure of sitting down on a live coding stream. So I think there's a lot of detail in here as well that means this is easy to handle. But realistically, the actual call out is about 15, 20 lines of code.
Yeah, basically
that's how easy it is to call your API from Salesforce and call your Heroku API.
Yeah, no session, no injecting headers, no session IDs or retrieving from custom settings or anything. It's just basically that.
Exactly. And I think that's really, really kind of cool for us to see and kind of people to be aware of. So we've got that. Should we jump over and then look at where that would call in the Heroku side of things? So we make that request and that calls our API.
Yes, let's do that. So we have a separation of concerns in the source. One is to define the routes, in other words, the paths, the API paths. And this is where the schema definition goes in. You can see, rather than generating the open API spec, we've got a number of JSON structures in here, which arguably in JSON in Node look just like the YAML you generate or JSON. Some of these in other frameworks are generated and it's less verbose, but ultimately you can see the requests taking in the string and requests taking the response. So this file really deals with, this is the entry point, generate Anthem, and then it really just deals with the interface side of things, and it delegates the actual implementation off to a service class. And yeah, Paul will talk us through this one because he's been driving.
Yeah, well, let's talk through the start of this, which I think is where there's some kind of interesting things that. So we've got a load of lists of fields and stuff at the top. That's not very exciting. What I think is more exciting is lines 76 to 79, but let's say 76, 77, 78 in particular. So because we are in our Heroku app and because we have access to AppLink, we are able to create a client, we are able to have our raw context, and we are able to create a data API object just nice and simply. So this allows us to go away and work with our Salesforce org using the standard Salesforce REST APIs without any kind of crazy, I say crazy, without us having to import like JS Force or anything else. There's no additional work we've had to do here or nothing else we've had to really get set up and import. We've got access to this from Heroku AppLink, and therefore we also know that we have the right level of permissions in place. If we scroll down a little bit, what Andy has highlighted now is we have some of the different queries we've written that come into play there. So we just, standard select queries. We've got one for opportunity, we've got one for account, and we've got one for opportunity line items. Nice and quick and easy. And then we go away and generate our tuples. So this is where the madness starts to occur. So the original idea we had for this was to use something called Fourier transforms. And to put it simply, if you imagine a sound wave, okay, we'd love to think that sound wave is just up and down, go woo. It's sort of like very bumpy and spiky as we have lots and lots of different sounds coming through, and that's a lot of data for us to kind of store and hold on to. And anyone who has seen an LP, an old vinyl record, that effectively stores the analog wave, okay, because we have all the pits in the record and the needle plays them. Everyone who has seen an analog record will know that it stores a limited amount of information on a big piece of vinyl, whereas a CD can store a lot more information on a much, much tinier disk. And the reason being is that it uses a laser to read the pits. And what those pits are effectively doing in a CD for music is kind of telling you whether you need something on or off. And what a Fourier transform does is it takes that wave that you have and it decomposes it into a number of sine and cosine waves and gives you a kind of code that says you're going to have these different values going on here in these different channels. Our original intention, and they just come out as a string of numbers, and our original intention, welcome capability snob to the call. Thanks for joining us, and I love that this is what you've wandered into, is a deep discussion of Fourier transforms. But what we're going to do is basically we're going to generate a list of numbers and then do kind of the inverse to go away and generate a wave back out. Okay, and the code that Andy showed us on the JavaScript file on the LWC is just kind of doing that. It's taking a stream of numbers and doing that. What we wanted to do is find a way of generating those numbers based upon our data in Salesforce. And so what we're doing is for every one of those fields that we have listed above, is we're going to go away and we're going to effectively create two pairs of numbers, which is going to be the length of the field name, length of the field's API name, and then a value that is related to the length and data within the field. So I think for a string field, if we look at line 208-ish, if it's a Boolean field, it's a 1 or a 0. If it's a number field, we just take the value. And if it's a string field, we take the length. And we plunk those values into these pairs, these kind of tuples that we've defined. And then what I've done is to help generate a bit more of a wavy noise. We had a lot of fun playing around with this. We had a lot of terrible noises generated, I think would be fair to say. Lots of popping noises and things like that. And so what we've done is we've just kind of looped the sound as many times as it's needed to kind of generate a bit more of a wavy form. So that's how we're generating those numbers. We did do all sorts of oddities beforehand to try and do using inverse Fourier transforms and things like that. But it was just giving us call stack exceptions and odd noises. And so what I did last night is go away and generate the lines that Andy's got up on here, lines 250 down. So our channel from tuples, what it does is, so say we've got our opportunity data, it takes our tuple, which we view as like a complex number, and it says we're going to take the sine wave portion of the two numbers added together, okay? And we can change that to be, what we're going to do is we're going to mess around with this. So we could change that to be multiplied, we could have it divided, we could have whatever, just to generate some random numbers. We'll leave it as plus for now. And then what we're going to do is, now we've got this series of numbers, is we're going to return a smooth version of that. And the smooth version is going to help flatten it and curve it a little bit. So if you imagine we've got all of these numbers, we could have a number that was +1 and a number that was -1. And that's quite a big jump between values. So what we're doing is we're just saying, well, if it's those two, maybe we go for the middle. And so that overall, it should be a slightly smoother wave. And we just do some simple kind of maths to do that, adding in a variance. And so we've got a couple of parameters we can tweak here. So the first parameter we can tweak is the variance value. So what I'm going to do, Andy, is I'm going to change that to 0.85 just for some fun. And at the top here, we also have a value, which is the number of samples, number of times you want to repeat the sample, which is the number of 1,000 at the moment. And it is on line 205. And so what we've got is on line 205, we take the total number of samples we have, which is the length of our noise, our sound, and we're doing 44,410 samples a second, which is 44 kilohertz even. We're dividing them by 2, and then we're dividing it by 1,000 again, so that it kind of smooths it out a little bit more. So I'm just going to change this let's change it to 1,200. And if I save that now, that'll update both of those on Andy's end. So if Andy wants to try regenerating it with one of the other files we've done before, we can then just see how it changes. And so for those who were listening along earlier, you'll know it sounded kind of slightly foghorny. This is probably going to sound more horrific, as the two numbers we had in there were me spending a couple of hours yesterday with some headphones on in a co-working space going, nope, try that, nope, try that. But we'll see what we get out. So let's run that and see what we get.
Yeah, let's do that. So let's make sure we got the right, we do have the right org. So I'm going to run it. We're going to use local mode.
Yeah.
Which will run exactly that code right now.
It's going to share your tab.
Yeah, and now it's run that. So it's downloaded obviously, because it stored the data in a org, it's downloaded that. And now I will share the tab. So I'm going to share the tab, which will make sure you can hear it. And let's see. By the way, if anybody on the call knows how to use StreamYard and have it share the audio when you're sharing your entire screen, comments would be welcome. All right. You ready?
Yep, you're on the stage. This is your sound warning.
Yes. Definitely sounded different to me. What about you, Paul?
We couldn't hear that. You've shared your screen rather than the tab.
Yeah, I didn't hear that one.
Did I? Oh, my apologies. Sorry. 1 second.
Peter and I, it sounded really different. It was just, that kind of perfect silent sound.
All right. There we go.
Cool. Try again. Yep, there we go. That sounded different. So we can just tweak these kind of numbers all we want to get different amounts. So if we tweak the variance again to say 0.45, and instead of 1,200, let me just do something like, this is going to sound terrible, so I'm going to apologize for this now, because the lower the number, it seems to sound weirder and weirder. So if we try rerunning that again in the background.
So folks can't see the code because I'm not sharing that right now. I don't know if you can share your screen, or do you want me to just sort of keep running it?
Just keep running it. We're fine. It's I've just changed those two numbers. So the reason we're kind of doing this is to show that if you do want to play with this yourselves later on and generate some weird sounds, you can do so. Some of them animals will hate. Like when I was doing this the first couple of times, I didn't have headphones on doing it, and my wife was downstairs. She's like, So, like she came upstairs wondering what was going on. Yeah, it's like
our dog was running around. I'm really pleased you've moved the code on because our dog was not liking the earlier iterations. All right, ready? You are our music maestro. That's the biggest difference I've heard with my ears.
There we go. See. Yay. So yeah, so we can generate some different noises, and this is a 5. I think at the moment we've got it on a 5-second run, and you can tweak the number of samples and effectively how lovely Major Third. Thank you. Effectively, eventually, we'll be able to just reproduce, the chord that David plays to please the Lord, and it will just be the sound of a certain opportunity record. The idea here is you can just generate silly noises, and you could go away and tweak it. If we had what I'm going to describe as a bucket load of data, so if you had an org's worth of data, you could actually go away, I think, and generate something really interesting. You probably want to store the file somewhere other than a content document version for that sort of size that would be generating. But you could go away and order every field on your object by field name and value, and then run it through and get some really, really interesting kind of numbers out there. This is a great comment from sorry if I'm mispronouncing it. I think it's Gear, but you annoy the sales vision until the opportunity is won. So it's constantly have this on loop in the background on your sales review calls to be like, you could spend hours tweaking it so that the closed one gives it a really nice noise, and earlier on in the pipeline just sounds worse and worse.
Someone just needs to put in an idea exchange idea to add this to the confetti opportunity close feature.
It'd be nice to hook into that. Yeah. Do you remember, Paul? I think they had this in the UK office, definitely in the US office at Financial Force when a deal was run. They had an actual bell. I
do recall someone ringing a bell. Yeah, it was. That was a bit old school. That wasn't it?
It was, yeah.
I've seen gongs as well.
Yeah, it's. I once worked in a call center where there was like the old ticker boards. The dot matrix kind of ticker boards. They had that showed up all the data, and someone integrated an alarm system into it, so that if it kind of went above a certain amount of waiting time and things like that, the alarm went off. That alarm lasted 3 hours before the cord was ripped out, because what they'd failed to realize is that guess what makes people who are sat on a phone listening, being annoyed because they've been sat on a phone waiting for a while, really happy? Yeah. Capability Snob has absolutely nailed it. A lot of fun when you have a grumpy customer. Like, imagine you just got on the phone line after waiting for an hour and all you heard in the background was So it's a fun little feature. But what we really wanted to show today was just the idea of offloading something onto Heroku, because the files that are generated from this are 17 megabytes in size. They are not very well compressed MP3 files or anything like that. This is just, in fact, can you, if I add your screen back, Andy, can you just open up the Anthem data.js file, which is like kind of the local generated one. So here you can see a set of the data, and if Andy wants to scroll to the bottom, we'll give him 10 minutes. Oh, you've cheated. You've just jumped.
Saved my fingers.
Yeah, so 661,000 lines of numbers, which is not ideal for anyone. But and obviously we could trim these numbers down and concatenate them and all these other things. And you can see there some of the scaling coming into effect on like line 504. We can see there's kind of to help the number be a bit smoother. So one of the things you could do, in fact, while we've got a few minutes, let's just play with this. So if we jump down, could you jump down to bottom of Anthem Generate, Andy? Mm-hmm. And let's have some fun. So we're going to have previous, and we're going to have previous, which is going to be the previous one. And then can anyone guess what I'm going to call this one? next, which is going to be index -1. Yep, that should work. So what I'm doing is I'm going to try smoothing out over a slightly longer period. Previous. Please do not ever write production code that has names like next, and previous. This is utterly shocking. This would never pass a code review. But that should now smooth it out so that it's taking a few more bars. So if we try rerunning again, this should now come out a bit longer. We could do this as many as we wanted and probably write much better code than previous, and so on and so forth. But I'm intrigued to see if it makes too much difference at all.
Okay, so I need to change the sharing.
Okay, you're back on the stage. Let's see now.
It oscillates more.
Yeah.
It's like it's more wobble.
I mean, I'm just writing terrible code now, but let's just go. So what I'm doing for those that cannot see on the screen, let me just share my screen real quick. I'll just zoom in, sorry. So I'm now going to do previous 2 and previous 3 and next 2 and next 3. And this will be minus 2. This will be minus 3, and this is minus 3, minus 4, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. That should work.
Ready?
Yeah, I'm. Oh, 1 minute. Nope. I need to add the value on here. Don't I? Previous 3, previous 2. Does everyone like my very cleverly named? Okay, let's try that. Is that saved? Is that okay?
It did save.
Let me go back. So try.
It did generate an error.
Oh, what's the error? I can probably see one.
Cannot read properties of undefined reading length. Now then, no, I know what this is. We need to clean up. We've run it too many times. I have a script for this. It's the data issue.
Oh.
Sure, give me a second.
Yeah. So where we're generating 17 megabytes of data and whacking these attachments in a scratch org, weirdly, we kind of eat through the file storage pretty quickly.
All right, let me just clean that out.
So what I'm looking forward to then, Pete, that we'll have to work on is see if we can get a collab between the Anthem app here and Salesforce Ben himself DJing. So for those who weren't at the Salesforce Ben after party at London's Calling, Ben McCarthy himself was up on stage in full Daft Punk outfit gear DJing, wasn't he? He's a very good DJ and DJs a lot of the Salesforce Ben parties. But what do you reckon? Do you reckon we can get Ben to do a crossover collab with us on this?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, there must be a way to mix this in or to sample this this sound.
Just halfway through his set, just suddenly the same repeating noise before the bass drop.
All right.
Cool. Let's try running that again.
Yeah, I think it wasn't that issue. So what I'm going to do,
I wonder if it's actually something here. 1 minute. Undefined lengths. We got vector index 1, index minus 2. Why is next one? Next is not defined. Ah, that's why. Yeah, sorry. This is me. This is a Paul issue,
Okay.
as so many of them are.
Well, it can't be the amazing, crafted code that you have there, Paul.
I know. Well, yeah. Weirdly, this code is not necessarily the best bit of code that I've ever written. Although, and Andy will remember some of the code I wrote at Financial Force, so that he had to review and give me pointers on. So it's probably not the worst code that Andy's seen of mine either.
No comment. I'm not being. What's the word in States? Trolled. I'm not being trolled.
All right, let me remove myself from this. Oh, Anthem player failed.
Reading
Ooh.
to fixed. I assume you can see it. You can see my screen. Do you want me to show?
Yeah, I can see. Well, I've got the errors coming up on mine. Can't read properties of null. Reading to fixed. Okay. Where's the to fixed coming from?
Let me see if I can zero that in a bit more for you. Let's run the.
Can't spell fix, which doesn't help. It's the player itself.
I wonder if. Yeah, let's just. Because what we could do here is deploy it. I'm just running the. Without the player, you can probably see I'm just running the invoke. Yeah,
so it's the content version.
Yeah, so something's happened with the player, the local player that didn't like. Is it generating more data or?
Shouldn't be. It should just be smoothing it out a little bit.
So there's something happened here. Does that look a bit different? At one point, it wasn't as nested.
Let's have a look at the. Should I have a look? Is it in the data?
Yeah, Anthem data, bin, Anthem player, Anthem data.
I have completely lost the bin directory. Have I? Yeah, I don't have. I can't see bin.
Okay.
Yeah, bin's not shared. Weirdly enough.
Well,
so is it returning a weirder nested set? Then do you think?
I don't know. Tell you what I'm going to do though. Let's just do git push Heroku main. Let's go wild. Put it into production. I just say everything's up to date. Of course it does. Let's just deploy it. And then we can try it from within the org.
Yeah.
So it generated something. I mean, I could go and have a look at what it generated. It does look a bit weird that it's generating the data. It seems an extra level of indirection. Maybe it's just my eyes because the file's so big I can't tell. It looks like there's a double list in there. Do you see what I mean? Anthem data.
I can't. We can't see Anthem data, Andy. So
right, let me stop the screen and then share the screen. Entire screen. That one. So this is the Anthem data the player's downloading.
Yeah, there's an extra. Oh, there's some nulls as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me just have a look. So index is less than. 1 minute. I've got it. So if the index is greater than 0, greater than 1, greater than 2, greater than 3, and then it's going to be length minus 1, 2 minus 3. Okay, I think I've fixed it.
All right.
I think it is me not being able to count from 0 properly.
All right.
It's like array lengths when you're trying to remember, is it minus
0,
4, minus 1
yeah.
plus, yeah.
Okay, that worked. Let's try the player. Still the same ID, isn't it? Yes.
Yeah.
Downloading. Okay, yes. So yeah,
Cool.
and the data. Actually, the data still looks weird. Let's just have a quick look. No, the data is still weird, but it didn't crash the player. Right.
Okay.
So let me go back.
I think it was because the nulls. I think it was my fault.
Okay. Share screen. Tab.
Right, 1 sec. And you're back on the stage. Go for it.
So you can see my screen here. That's the right tab, right?
Yeah, we can see Anthem play.
More of a buzz than a horn, I think.
Oh, we couldn't hear that then.
Oh, could you not?
No. Which tab are you using?
Oh, okay, hold on.
Yeah, definitely a bit flatter. But yeah, and a bit more
Yeah,
cyclical.
it's more of a buzz, like an electrical buzz to me.
Yeah, it's kind of getting that direction, isn't it?
Eventually we're just going to end up with it being sort of too smoothed out. But you can leave that for everyone to play with at home.
Yeah.
So we have about 5 minutes left. So let's just go back through what hopefully people have seen today and where you can go to find it all. So first things first, I'm just going to bring up the repository here. There is a link in the comments, but you can find it there if you go to github.com/cloudbytestv, and you will find Anthem Salesforce as well as the Sandbox session repository, where you can find all of the ones that Peter and I have worked on before. Nowhere near the level of quality of this code, so don't get your hopes and expectations too high, and do not put any of it in production. So what we've shown today, though, just to recap for everyone, is what Heroku AppLink is and how you can use it, and then B, we've shown you how you can deploy it. So Andy, keep me honest here, but for Heroku AppLink, the steps we go through are, number one, we have to turn it on in our org and assign a permission set for us so we have permissions to create Heroku AppLink.
Yep.
Number two, we create a Heroku app that has Heroku AppLink enabled on that with our service mesh and tell it has to use Node.js. Just as an interesting side question I thought of earlier, for the writing back. So Heroku AppLink is two directions. One direction is you calling the Heroku API, and the other direction is Heroku writing back into Salesforce. For the calling the API can be written in any language, any framework, whatever you like. For writing back, am I correct at the moment? The SDK only supports JavaScript and Java.
Yeah, it's actually Node and Python, but
Okay.
they've also documented. In fact, there's a Java sample that shows really what's happening is you're just getting a HTTP header on the incoming, and you can look at the code, and it's just decoding that. If you look at the Java version, it's a JSON structure, base 64 encoded. And so the incoming is very easy to get that. And then you use the AppLink API to get the token, and that's all documented. So in any language, if you're proficient with just looking at your HTTP headers in your code, which you largely should be using these frameworks, then you can get that information. And then in the Java case, because there's no SDK, you can use your preferred language, your preferred framework. And Java does have WSC, which is a good framework for talking to Salesforce. But then you're in the lands of just how you would normally talk to a Salesforce REST API. The SDK helps because it gives you some more streamlined methods, but it also has a unit of work in it. So transactional semantics apply more than if you were in Apex here, because you want to know whether data is committed or not, especially if it's multiple records over several objects. So the SDK does have a nice composite API wrapper, but again, you could just use the composite API or compound API in your code in any language. So the SDK it's not a blocker, I would say. You just need to know a little bit more about the headers and how to connect those to your favorite way of talking to the Salesforce APIs.
Cool, thank you. So that's nice and easy then. So we set up our Heroku app, you add on the add-on, you make sure it knows that it's using Node for this kind of setup here, and then we assign a couple of permission sets, connect the two, and that's it. You do an OAuth login, it connects it creates your connected external app, it creates your external service, it links everything together, and that's pretty much it. It's nice and easy. Then you are free to work with it from Apex or Flow as you wish, and from your language back in.
And
Nice and
that's really
simple.
one of the patterns, to be honest. There is 3 others that are listed in the samples code. We can share a link to your listeners after the session, but you can also do event-driven as well, and asynchronous callbacks with AppLink. So this is more of a synchronous direct in, callback out, but you can do a lot more with long-running processes as well, as I covered in one of my recent blogs.
Oh, nice. Cool. Very, very cool. So, yeah, so that's a cool thing we've seen end-to-end, and then we've seen some we've seen some good LWC code, some nicely written API code, and then some spurious JavaScript code that kind of generates weird numbers and does some oddities for us. So, I mean, Pete, do you feel enlightened now as to how Heroku AppLink works and how you could get up and running? And also, obviously, you're going to install this code straight into the Salesforce panel, right, to generate noises for everyone.
Somebody might object about that. No. I definitely have a better idea. It was kind of what I expected. But I do have to say I like the developer experience better than, because I know AppLink is kind of the sort of spiritual successor to Salesforce Functions, and I think this developer experience feels better and feels a bit less cumbersome than I always felt Functions was. Which, no offense, I know you worked a lot on that, Andy. So
that's fine. It's good to have the ground at this, and I agree. I think also having the Heroku DX actually exposed to you rather than kind of hidden away is what you're probably attributing to why you're seeing that, because there's a lot of beauty and elegance in the Heroku DX.
Yeah, 100%. So, and I think having some of those same, that ability, the AppLink API surfaced into Apex, and then the Salesforce APIs surfaced into the SDK of whichever one of those you pick up. Like, those all really make a lot of sense.
Super. So, gents, where can people find you if they want to find out more about you and what you do? Andy, where can people find you?
AndyInTheCloud.com, which links to my LinkedIn profile.
Best place for me right now is linkedin.com/in/Peter Chittum.
Super. And if you haven't heard, there's this small site called Salesforce Ben where Peter's in charge of. It's pretty easy to find. Most people have come across that one. And for myself, you can find me in a bunch of places. On LinkedIn as Paul Batterson, and pretty much everywhere else as P. Batterson. Groundworkapps.com if you want to hear more about my apps, and Cloud Bytes TV on YouTube and on LinkedIn as well. If you are new to the channel, thank you very much for watching. If you've enjoyed it, please leave us a little like, leave us a little comment. Thank you so much for joining, and to those of you who have commented and played along with us, we hope you found it useful and have learned something, as well as enjoyed the noises. Please remember to subscribe if you haven't already, so that you can stay up to date for the next one in a couple of weeks' time, and just to hear about what cool stuff is being released out there every single week with the newsletter and other things. Thank you very much, guys, for joining us, and have a good weekend, everyone. We'll see you on the next one. Bye.
Have a good one.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.